What's happening, hobby people? My name is Jacob from the Dry Paint Pot, and this week I'm going to show you a very easy way to add a weathering effect to your models. So stick around. So just like almost anything in this hobby, there's no one right way to do anything at all. You can look at two models that are almost identical, and I guarantee you if they were painted by two different people, even the same person, they probably did an extra step here or there. They probably did things a little different. Maybe they washed, maybe they didn't. At the end of the day, the end result really is what matters. So long as you get to where you're trying to go, it doesn't really matter how you did it. So with that, there's no right way to weather, because there are so many different types of weathering. You've got chipping, you've got scratching, you've got rust. I mean, there are so many different things that you can do depending on the material and the look that you're trying to give it. So this week, what I'm gonna show you is what I do for my objective markers. Now, it's very easy. You can use it on your Space Marines or any type of metal. So it's not the fanciest, but it also looks really good. So I use this technique on a lot of the things that I do. Now, just because I call it easy doesn't mean that it's bad. There are just some extra steps that I would personally take if I was doing this to a display piece or something that I was gonna put into a big competition or something. So there's definitely a lot of value in this week's lesson, but if you wanna know the extra things that I would do to really spice this up, I can surely make a video on that at a later time, or I can just maybe do something small on Instagram, maybe a little post or something. So if that's something that you might like, just let me know in the comment section. And just one more thing before we jump into things today, I just want to remind you that if you need some new brushes, Hobby Hotspots and I have teamed up. So if you use the code below, it give you 10% off your order, free shipping for orders over $25, and a portion of that sale will come back to the channel and help me out. But now that that's out of the way, let's get things started. All right, so real quick before we get things going today, I just want to let you know that the techniques that I'm going to teach you today are quite universal. You can use them on any type of metal that you're trying to weather. So while I am using these objective markers, you can do it on Space Marine armor or buildings or whatever you're working on. And the base color that I'm going to be using for these objective markers, which is Warboss Green, doesn't matter. Just the colors that we use when we start to weather really matter. So the very first thing that you want to do, obviously, is go ahead and prime and throw down a nice base coat. Now you can go ahead and do a little bit of edge highlighting if you like afterwards, but it's really not necessary because we're going to weather this pretty heavy. Now you'll notice in today's tutorial that I'm a little bit messier than I usually am with throwing down a base coat on this thing. And many of you guys will be out there like, dude, what the hell are you doing? Like, take your time, make it look nice. The thing is, it's gonna look nice at the end, but really this is just an objective marker, so I don't really care about it being too fancy and having all this blending and all that. I mean, the base coat's gonna be fine. It's not like I'm base coating a face. It's just a crate. So it's no big deal if it's, you know, not perfect. All right, now our base coat is complete. Everything's looking good. And if you're wondering why I'm painting two instead of just focusing my time on one, it's because this weathering technique is so easy to do. I could knock both of these out in one sitting. And that's what I'm planning on doing. It is, I think it's a little after 4 o'clock right now, and I plan on having these totally done within the next few hours. So the next thing that you want to do after everything is completely dry is go ahead and give this a wash in Nuln Oil. And you can change that to Agrax Earth Shade if you like, but whatever dark wash you have or dark ink is what you want to use. Now go ahead and start washing, but don't allow this wash to pool too much. A little pooling is okay, but we don't want to go overboard with it. Now, if you notice that you are experiencing some pooling, go ahead and just rinse off that brush, dry it off in your hand a little bit, and just dab away at some of the areas that are really starting to collect wash. Welp, I just spilled my Nuln Oil everywhere. So, yep. Wouldn't be painting if I wasn't spilling Nuln Oil. Oh man, it got on my stickers too. That sucks. But, oh well. It happens. So I'm going to clean this up, and then we'll get right back to things. Alright, now there's something very important that we need to think about before we move on. We need to know where we want to weather, because we can't just go right at the mini and just start attacking it with all these different techniques, because it's going to look ridiculous. It's not going to look realistic. So what you want to do is, I'm going to use the Space Marine for an example, is you want to think about where the damage is going to occur and how it happens. So for instance, when I look at the Space Marine, and let's say I was going to do scratches, I would want the scratches to go in this direction, as in this way, coming right at him. It wouldn't make sense for the scratches to come in this direction because he doesn't run backwards. So whatever's hitting him is not coming from here, it's coming from here. And that's very important to think about as we start to weather, because we don't want to go overboard with it, and we want to make sure it's in the right places. So let's take a look at this crate that I recently finished, and you'll notice that a lot of the damage occurs at the bottom, because I imagined that this was being dropped, from a ship in the sky, and it's constantly falling, hitting the ground, so the scratchers are going up, but it's landing in the mud, so it's starting to get really nasty and starting to rust a little bit. And with those thoughts, I was able to weather it accordingly. So when I look at these crates, I'm going to do the same kind of thing. I'm going to weather in the same sort of areas, not only so they match that other crate that I have, but because that's the idea that I have in my head. So before you use these techniques that I'm going to show you, think about your model and how it exists in its universe, and then weather it accordingly. So let's move into our first real step. What you're going to need is some black paint. So I'm using some Abaddon Black. And go ahead and get that on your brush. And I imagine that this crate has been dropped many times. It's very old, it's been used plenty of times, so a lot of the damage is going to occur to the bottom of the crate. So what I'm going to do is take this Abaddon Black, and you can either sponge it on or use a brush. Well, I like to use a brush that adds a little more control, and just sort of dab like this. Now you want this to look realistic, and weathering should not be uniform. It should be random, so try not to make this like an edge highlight. You don't want it to be straight and perfect. You want it all to be varied, a little different, skip an area over here, focus a little more over here. So just go ahead, do that, and focus this on a lot of the corners and sharp edges as well. Now what you can also do in this step is use a sponge, just add a little bit of Abaddon Black in there, and go ahead and just sponge those corners just as you were doing with the brush. Again, either or works just fine. It just comes down to preference. Once you're done with the bulk of the damage, you now want to start adding in some scratches. So what you do is just get yourself a brush with a nice tip, and think of wherever you want the scratches to be, and just lightly add some nice thin black lines. So another thing that I really like to do to add some scratches is get some paint onto your brush, and we're basically going to dry brush it on. So just take that brush and add those nice streaks in there. Now remember, I'm not trying to win a golden demon with this paint job. I just want to weather in a way that's quick and also very effective. I want it to look good. Now, if I were doing this for a painting competition or a model that I wanted to be on display, I'd be a little more careful. And I also probably wouldn't go straight to black. I might do a lighter color first and then start weathering. It depends on the armor, depends on the look you're trying to go for. But with this, we just want it to look very weathered and nasty. But at the same time, we don't want to spend like a whole day on this. We're looking for a technique that's quick and effective. All right, now for our next step, you can either use a brush again or a sponge, but you want to get some silver. So I have some Iron Breaker silver on this sponge right here. What we want to do is we want to go over the black that we just put down, but we do not want to cover it entirely. So as you see, as I dab it on here, we want to cover a majority of the black that we put down, but still leave a little bit of an outline. And go ahead and do that over all the black that you just put down. Now, if you're using a sponge to do this, I highly suggest that you go back with a fine tip brush and just pull together some of that silver. So as we sponge on, you know that the silver is very spread apart because it's sponged. So we just want to clump up some areas like this. So it looks like so. So the very next thing that I'm gonna do to this crate is add some stains. So to do that, I'm gonna get some Agrax Earth Shade, and I'm just gonna get a bunch of it off my brush. I really want very little to be on there. And then what I wanna do with a brush that has a nice fine tip, I just wanna put some very light streaks. And to intensify these stains, what you can do is go back over those areas, maybe 1 or 2 more times, and it really starts to intensify the color. Now, to determine where to put the stains, just again, think about this item in real life and think about where water would run on it. So for a crate, water is coming from up top, the streaks are gonna go from top to bottom. All right, so we have chipped metal, we have stains, we have everything all set here, and it's very bright, which is nice, but it's now time to add a little bit of rust. So what I like to use is Rise of Rust, and instead of adding it on a big brush, since we're working with a small surface, I like to add it to a smaller brush. And I like to use one that's kind of beat up. So just go ahead and just like you're dry brushing, get most of it off. And then what we wanna do is go very light with this and just go around some of the areas that we did in silver and just start to add a little bit of orange in there. Now, again, we don't want to go overboard. We just want to bring down that shine a little bit and kind of muddy it up. All right, so the rust is complete and all the colors are really starting to come together now. So at this point, we're really going to muddy things up. So I have some typhus corrosion here, and this is a technical. It's fairly gritty and it's very concentrated. So what I like to do is just put a little bit on my brush. It's gonna add a little bit of texture and it's gonna bring out that shine as well. So you just get a little bit like that. And go ahead and just go over some of that silver. And you can even go a little wild too and go all over if you really want to get it nasty. And since we don't want this to look clean and pristine, if you put it somewhere you don't want, just take your finger, wipe it away. It'll leave a little bit of a stain, but it's no big deal. As you see here, we have the silver, the black, and the streaks, and everything is sort of separated. But once you go in with that typhus corrosion, the silver still comes through, but it really just ties it all together. And again, if you add a little too much, just wipe it away with your finger. Leaves a little bit of a stain, but it looks good. All right, these things look nasty in a good way. And now's the time where we can go in there and brighten up some of the silver that we just brought down. Now, we don't want to bring it all the way back up because that's going to defeat the last step that we just did, but we definitely want to bring back just a pinch of that shine. And then afterwards, you can go ahead and add any extra little things that you would like. So for instance, on this crate, I added some blood just for fun, and you can go ahead and give it another wash if you really want to bring down the color. But once that's complete, I'm going to go ahead and finish up the pieces in the inside. We'll be all set. All right, so the insides have been painted, the blood has been splattered, and these things are done. Now again, this isn't gonna win a Golden Demon Award. We're not going for that. There are a ton of different steps that can be taken to really upgrade this look, but for basic weathering, this will always do the trick. And both of these were knocked out within a sitting, and I'm happy. Now, if you've watched any of my other videos, you know this is the part where I usually give a big shout out to my patrons, but I have something to announce. I just hit 5 patrons, and it doesn't sound like a lot, but to me, it blows my mind. I had no idea that I would get here, that 5 people around the world would want to support what I'm doing and, want to see this type of content coming out. So I just want to let all of you know, it means the absolute world to me. Thank you so very much. And now that we're at 5, that's too many for me to memorize. I know I probably should be able to, but I don't know. So a massive shout out to Leandrist, Che Phillip, CK, The Dark Path, and Came From The Moon. Thank you all so very much for all of your support. And if you also like to help support the channel, check out the link to my Patreon below. And if you want to just hang out and talk about the hobby, I'll drop a link to my Discord down low too. Now let's check out this week's viewer submissions. So this Boxy Dreadnought is by Leandrist, and it is so great to see old Boxy Dreadnought still on the table. I love the Redemptor Dreadnought. It is so freaking cool. I've got one in the case that I need to finish, but since I started with the Deathwatch Start Collecting, which had a Venerable Dreadnought in there, it just has a very special place in my heart. But it's such a good feeling to see people paint these very well, which you did here. First things first, the lenses are so good. I think you do lenses better than I do. I definitely need to practice those a little more. And the edge highlighting is looking pretty sharp. Now the thing that I like most about this is you went for clear tanks on the sidearm with the Melta gun, or Melta cannon, a Melta thing, whatever the right arm is. You went for clear tanks. I like that a lot. I painted mine solid silver back in the day, but I love when someone can pull off the effect to make it look like there's actually liquid in there. So awesome job with that, and I really hope you have some more Dreadnoughts to paint, because if I remember correctly, I think you had a couple. And this Doomstalker is by Wargaming Dude, and my god, I've had so much fun painting Necrons in the past month and a half, and I was really hoping that the person I was painting Necrons for wanted me to paint this thing, because look at the gun on the top of that thing. My god, that is ridiculous. But this is so freaking cool. I love the base. It's very simple, so what it does is it pulls your eyes to the top and makes you really focus in on the model, but at the same time, it's very clean. The shrubs break up the browns and grays of the base, so it adds a little flair, and all in all, this turned out great. And this post is by Che Gavesa, and it's for some kind of painting competition. Let me see real quick. The Paint on Plastic Mac Comp 2021. I can't read, I don't know. But this pilot's looking really cool. I swear to God, you were the king of contrast paint, because I'm pretty sure that the blue on those overalls are contrast, and they look so very good. The whole cockpit that you're working on looks very clean, and I can't wait to see whatever this goes into, because I don't know what the bigger model is with this. So very excited to see that, and be sure to send me some pictures. Psst. Psst. Hey. Hey you. Be sure to tag me at The Dry Paint Pot, or hashtag The Dry Paint Pot on Instagram and Facebook, because I pick my favorite posts each week and I feature them in my upcoming videos. Now wash your brushes, clean your paint pots, and keep on painting.